Welcome, everyone. This is the November 11, California time, 2021 session in our series of mobility. Asia moves forward in the fourth industrial revolution. I'm very excited to say that we have a special session today that is produced in cooperation with the Center for South Asia in Stanford University and also with the Institute for Competitiveness, India. We have with us today a distinguished panel of speakers to address how digital transformation and mobility is fitting into digital transformation in India in the future. So our speakers today, first I should also say thanks to our member companies. The US Asia Technology Management Center is an industry affiliates program, so our member companies are really our primary sponsors for everything we're doing. Their names were shown just before the program started, and we hope that you'll take a look at our website to find out more. So today we have with us Mr. Shri Amitabh Kant, who is the CEO of NITI Aayog, which is one of India's premier think tanks. He's a distinguished author of a number of books, such as, India, An Incredible Story, and also The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. He has been the head of a number of national projects in India, such as Make in India, Startup India, Incredible India. And he is the national project director of the UNDP's Rural Tourism Project, which has really brought about a paradigm shift in spreading tourism to Indian villages. Also with us today is Mr. Gopal Vittal, who is the CEO of Airtel and also managing director of Airtel. In his role as CEO, he's responsible for defining and delivering the business strategy and providing overall leadership for Airtel's India and South Asia operations. Under Mr. Vittal, Airtel has achieved a lifetime high revenue market share, was recognized as the second most valuable brand in India. It was ranked 10th best company to work for and also the best employer in telecom in India. He was previously with Bharti Enterprises, where he was the group director. In this capacity, he worked toward formulating and supporting Airtel's international strategy and data expansion. And joining me is a person that I have really been privileged to cooperate with over the last 2 years, and we've known each other a lot longer than that, Dr. Amit Kapoor, who is the honorary chair of the Institute for Competitiveness, India. He is the chair for the Social Progress Initiative and the Shared Value Initiative in India, and he sits on the board of competitive initiatives in Mexico, the Netherlands, Italy, France, and also for the University of Vermont's SEMBA Advisory Board. He's an affiliate faculty of the Harvard Business School, doing studies of microeconomics of competitiveness and value. And so Amit and I are going to be sharing the podium as moderators for this session today. And I think that the best thing for me to do is to turn the mic over to Amit for the first question.
Thank you, Richard. It's absolutely an honor to be collaborating on this program. Thanks to Gopal and Amitabh ji for joining this session. We'll quickly dive into the conversation on mobile communication and the future of digital transformation in India. From my point of view, I think the multiplier of this industry is tremendous, and this is what we are really trying to understand. So Amitabh ji, just to roll the process, in fact, I just wanted to ask, how do you think that mobility fits into India's strategy for digital transformation? What is it that we are really doing, and how it has really had an impact?
So let me first say, Amit, that what India has achieved in its digital transformational journey is quite inspirational. And this has been possible because of what we popularly term as the jam trinity. We have over 1 billion Indians have their biometric. India is the only country which has this. 1 billion Indians have mobiles, and over 1 billion Indians have bank account. So we use this jam trinity to actually do a lot of financial inclusion through the mobile system. And this is actually, if you look at what is the India stack with its APIs, such as Aadhaar authentication, then you have eKYC, you have eSign, and you have the unified payment interface, the UPI through which digital payment is made, has allowed governments, businesses, startups, developers to utilize the public digital infrastructure to offer varied financial services through the mobile system. And just to give you one example of the unified payment interface platform, that, on top of which we've allowed all private players to innovate. So you have Bharat Pay, you have Phone Pay, you have Google Pay, you have Samsung Pay. Everybody is innovated on top of that. And just this October, in a span of about 4 years, UPI has done over $100 billion worth of payment. Now, imagine, its transactions are more than Amex, which has been there for many decades. If it was a private sector company, what its valuation would have been. So this basic approach of a government creating a platform and on allowing private sector to innovate on top of that has led to huge amount of innovation. And government, actually, when I was a young officer, there used to be a lot of financial leakages when we used to transfer money. Today, we transfer 500 amounts relating to 526 government schemes through this. We just use the direct bank account into the beneficiaries using the mobile system, and the individual can withdraw his money through the mobile. So this has led to a huge amount of financial inclusion, actually. And this is, to my mind, really huge in India. And on top of this, actually, through a whole range of this has allowed startups, this has allowed businesses, all of them to innovate. So as of this year, we have close to about 400 payment startups in the country, mobile digital wallets, gateways, POS, mobile POS, and they are really driving a whole huge amount of innovation. And I'll talk about this a little later, because this has now, this movement has now led to, we are throwing up a lot of data. We are throwing up a new internet creator, every internet user every 3 seconds in India, and all because of the spread of smartphones all over India. So mobile telephony is really driving a paradigm shift. It's brought in huge amount of digital transformation in India.
So Amitabh, just a very quick follow-on question. You said something very important, that the whole idea of direct benefit transfer and how it has really been done for 526 schemes. Could you just throw some more light on that? Because that is something very important, because that has been a transformational experience in many, many ways.
Yeah. So, till a few years back, the central government used to transfer money to the state government. The state government used to transfer money to the districts. And it's important for the participants to understand that India is geographically a very large country. It's bigger than 24 countries of Europe and another 30,000 kilometers. So how do you transfer money? And when you transfer money from the federal government to the state and to the districts, there used to be a lot of leakage in passing money through cash. Now we just transfer money in these government schemes. We put money straight into the bank account of over 1 billion people, straight into the bank account of the 1 billion people. And because they have bank accounts are linked to their biometric, and bank accounts are linked to their mobile. So I use my mobile and I do a digital transaction withdrawing that money. And it's so simple, so easy that it has made financial inclusion possible in a very big way. And this has enabled government to really ensure that there are no leakages. Money goes straight into the bank account. The mobile transactions are so easy. I have not used my credit card. I have not used my ATM. I have not used my checkbook for over last 2.5 years. I make all my payments through my mobile. So that is what India is doing. It is making ATMs, it is making checkbooks, it is making credit cards totally technology redundant.
Very interesting. Richard. Richard, you're on mute.
Yeah, that's incredibly impressive. I think the first thing that I want to do for my first question is to ask Gopal, how did this system come to be? Especially Amitabh had mentioned this jam, which is this linking of 3 key areas. How did this happen?
Well, thank you for having me on this panel. I think there are 2 main areas that I do want to talk about, and I think I will echo what Mr. Kant said. The mobile infrastructure that has been created in India has required a tremendous amount of investment, and I think that's the first thing that I would say. Over the inception of the industry, which is not very old, it's about 25 years old, there have been almost $120 billion of investment that's been poured into creating this mobile infrastructure. We have in the industry about 600,000 towers, 1.2 million kilometers of fiber. We cover 99% of the population on 4G, which is an incredible amount of coverage in a very widely geographically distributed country like India. In fact, it's interesting to see that if you take India, the fixed broadband numbers in India is just about 22 million. But mobile connections are over 1 billion. And that just shows you that the route into digital connectivity has actually been from mobile rather than fixed, which has happened in many other parts of the world. Now, the second thing that I would say is it's also required an incredible amount of ingenuity. This is a country where the average revenue per user is $2. And for most of you on the panel who are abroad and who use mobile connectivity, $2 basically gives us in India 45 gigabytes of data a month and free calling. So it's incredibly cheap. And remember, in this industry, we have access to the same equipment. We're buying the same equipment, we're buying the same technologies. It's the most modern technologies around the world. So how do Indian operators and how does the Indian industry enable this at this pace of investment, at this very low level of average revenue per user? How does it even survive? If you look at the return on capital of this industry today, it's about 5 to 6%. So it's low. It's lower than what you would get if you put your money into a bank account. But if you get your average revenue per user from $2 to just $3, that's just $1 more, the return on capital jumps to about 20%. So this has required incredible ingenuity. And I want to talk about a couple of things as to why and how this ingenuity has come about. I think the first thing I would say is the business model itself. This is a business model that's different from many other markets. 95% of our citizens and our customers are on prepaid plans. The billing cost, the collection cost, the latency of applications that you run on a prepaid system is absolutely world-class. And that infrastructure allows us to actually cut the cost down. Another example is the way we sweat our spectrum. As you know, spectrum is the most vital resource in a mobile technology. Our customers per hertz of spectrum in India are the highest in the world because we really know how to sweat the spectrum. The second thing I would say is digital at the core, and that allows us to be really frugal. And let me give you a couple of examples there. at Airtel, we have over 200 million users on our digital assets. 60% of our payments are online. And every single thing that we do is to actually look at how do we strip waste out. For example, we used to have hundreds and thousands of call center agents at our call centers. And we had people monitoring the quality of the call just to see what customers were experiencing. Today, across 22 languages, all of it is done through machine learning and algorithms. Every single call is monitored and it's done at no cost. It's just technology that is learning every single day. Or for example, when a customer complains, the predictive AI that goes into actually seeing what is the complaint is getting better and better every single day. And all of this strips out cost. And the third thing I would say on the ingenuity is that our customers' expectations are no different from anywhere else in the world. They're very, very high. And one of the things we've learned is how do you become more transparent with customers? So we had an initiative called Open Telco, which is really talking to customers and telling them where our faults are. And the moment you do that, actually what they do is call us less, which means we cut our costs down. So all of this, I would say, has had a tremendous impact. And I think the first impact is that at the top end of the market, India is a very stratified market. It's got various income stratas. At the top end of the market, the consumption of mobile data per month is about 6 gigabytes. But as you go down the population strata, as you go down the income strata, it jumps up to 25 gigabytes a month, because mobile is the way by which they do everything, whether it is education, healthcare, video, entertainment, payments, social media. It's the mobile infrastructure that runs it all. In fact, one of the things that I've always figured out in this industry is that we are remembered only when we fail. It's that essential, a device that we actually operate. And one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that it was one of the few times that we were truly remembered because we worked, because we enabled everything, the whole economy and almost everything, whether it was work. I mean, look at what we're doing today. This would have not happened perhaps 3 years ago. But it is just that this has been the spine that has actually created all of that impact.
So, Gopal, I would just like to interject here, the very important points that you're saying, and something like just building up on what Amitabh was saying and what you've actually said, on this new infrastructure, on this service where the mobile data is so cheap and it has actually become ubiquitous. Your services are ubiquitous. People just don't realize it, as you said. How do you think it has had a transformational idea or experience or effect on the new business models that are actually emerging? And especially during the times of the pandemic, it seems to have really flowered in many, many ways in terms of really enhancing the capabilities or enhancing the models or new ideas that have actually come through.
Thanks, Amit. I think, mobile has really been at the heart of everything. I mean, today, 45 to 50% of our traffic is on video. So it is the device for entertainment. You look at television screens today. There are about 160 million television screens, but there are over 1 billion mobile screens. There are over 600 million smartphones, all of which are using all kinds of entertainment, health, payments, video, e-commerce, productivity tools. All of that gets by ride sharing, food delivery. All of it is getting enabled on mobile. But I do want to pick up on what Mr. Kant said on payments. I think the combination of Aadhaar, which is the biometric capability, and UPI, which is the payments interface, has actually changed the way we do business. And let me give you one example of one of the businesses that I think is playing a very important role within our portfolio. This is really called Airtel Payments Bank. This is a very simple business model. The Reserve Bank of India issued these licenses for payments banks, which is basically about looking at business models that were not banks that were not allowed to lend. So these are very, very thin banks only enabling payments. Now, what was the logic of this? The logic of this was to really enable financial inclusion. So today in India, there are about 220,000 bank branches and ATMs. But on Airtel Payments Bank, we have 500,000 bank correspondents, which is riding on the mobile distribution system of these mom and pop stores all across the country. Now, what is the business model? The business model is, if you take a village in any part of India, the nearest bank is, let's say, 6 kilometers away. How does access to cash, or how does access to payments happen for that villager out there? This is where Payments Bank comes in, because you're solving the last mile problem of connectivity and payments right at the point of consumption. We do, by the way, I was listening to Mr. Kant talking about $100 billion of UPI transactions across. The Airtel Payments Bank is doing $18 billion of annual throughput through its platform. The revenue that you earn is only $130 million out of this. So it's a tiny, tiny amount of revenue that you earn for a very large throughput. And it's a completely digital bank. There is no paper, there is no checkbook, there is no debit card, there's no credit card. Everything is done on the mobile. Now, what are the kinds of business models that run on it? You can send money. So, I was in a small village yesterday, about 20 kilometers from Ujjain, which is in the west of India. There was a person who walked in, a farmer, who walked into one of the retail outlets and picked up $60 of cash from that retail outlet. Now, how did that get enabled? Instant reconciliation using the biometric device with the Aadhaar platform that Mr. Kant talked about. An instant amount of reconciliation that happened at the back end in terms of the financial systems. Our systems riding on the platform that we built, cash being paid out to that villager so he could go away and actually take it away. Now, we are trying to, and if you look at these business models, remittances, payments, cash management, for example, all of the cash that is collected today by Amazon or Flipkart or any of these e-commerce players is digitized at its source through Airtel Payments Bank at the point of sale. So you collect the cash from there, digitize it at its source. And this, I think, is really what has been enabled because of all of these platforms, including the mobile infrastructure. So, I could go on and on of some of the businesses that have been created, but it is fascinating that the real problem that this bank is solving is financial inclusion. Direct benefit transfers gets enabled through it, and all of the other things that I mentioned.
Let me add on to what Gopal has said, because I mentioned about the 400 payment startups in the country. And now, with over 100 billion worth of transaction value in the UPI system, with a payment problem getting sorted out, the focus of the ecosystem then shifted towards lending. And using the mobile and the Jam Trinity ecosystem, in the lending segment, there has been emphasis on both consumer as well as the MSME-based lending. And our Indian fintechs have allowed innovation in this space, allowing for new models to come up. So a lot of flow-based lending based on digital transaction. And if you look at the Indian ecosystem, there are leading companies in the space, young startups, Lending Card, Pine Labs, MobiKwik, all are doing flow-based lending. And, once this was done, there was some sufficient comfort with payments and lending. The focus then shifted towards personal finance and money management and stock trading. And then you have a plethora of entities and young startups, which are all becoming unicorns. And they have come up in the space. And if you look at Zerodha, Grow, Upstock, they're all becoming unicorns because they use this Jam Trinity and the mobile based, and everybody is doing stock trading through mobiles. So all this is the ecosystem. And what we are witnessing now is the emergence of financial products which target the more complex segments. For instance, the new insurance tech companies, and the new insurance tech companies such as Digit and Acko are actually greatly simplifying insurance. It's all mobile-based insurance, and they are covering the end-to-end life cycle of origination, underwriting, claims, and selection, all through the Jam Trinity, all through the mobile. So, in the past, the legacy financial institutions have always tried to solve for everyone with the, their solutions were focused on select high revenue customers. They were for the rich and famous. And the fintech ecosystem now, using the Jam Trinity, has actually ended this traditional approach with new customized products. They are making customized products available for different groups, including people below the poverty line, and they're paving the way for emerging of the new, their newer banks are coming up, and newer banks have come up focused on millennials. They are focused on gig economy workers, and therefore this entire movement of the Jam Trinity, the mobile telephony, the bank accounts, the biometrics has really, really been transformational. And all the new unicorns which are coming up are all driving India's massive paradigm shift towards digitization, towards a completely new revolutionary approach, simply because the data costs are low, transactions are easy, and India has over 1 billion mobiles and over 750 smartphones. And as we spread the internet into the rural parts of India, we realize that actually, more than physical infrastructure, these areas require digital infrastructure, which will transform the lives of citizens of India.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what Mr. Kant said. It's quite interesting to see that actually, and in the last comment that he made, which is the digital infrastructure in rural India has become far more important than physical infrastructure, simply because actually it's far more modern and far more technologically advanced than the physical infrastructure. So one of the examples of what he said is that if you look at the consumption in the most remote parts of the lowest income states like Bihar and UP, they are amongst the highest in the country. The consumption of data is amongst the highest in the country because the mobile smartphone is the conduit to everything that person can actually do, simply because the physical infrastructure is not as good as the digital infrastructure.
Thanks. This is all incredibly positive sounding. And those of us who've been around long enough will think back to Dr. C.J. Prahalad's book 20 years ago on the bottom of the pyramid, and how this infrastructure really was nowhere in place at that point, and to see how far things have gone. But Amitabh, I have to ask you, is there a dark side to this? Social inclusiveness is a really hard kind of concept to get. And if the lower income people in more poor areas are actually using more data, are they more under the control of the IT companies?
See, it's important to say that we've also taken a very strong leadership role in the open data for finance space. We believe that data is critical for the citizens of India. We believe that data is to be privately held and privately owned by the citizens of India. The data does not belong to the citizens. Data must be, India is data rich, is becoming more and more data intelligent. And therefore, this data must be cleaned, it must be annotated, it must be used for a lot of machine learning, a lot of artificial intelligence work, and this data can enable India to solve many of the problems of India. Problems of agriculture productivity, problems of water, problems of huge challenges on health and education. And that is the strength of India. The strength of India is the size and scale of its data. And if we are able to use it effectively in a clean, annotated manner, we will find solutions to the many challenges of India. And these challenges are immense. India can be a highly innovative place thanks to this ecosystem that we have built up. We don't need to do innovation for driverless cars like you're doing in Stanford. We need innovations for finding solutions on health, education, and productivity in agriculture. And if we are able to find solutions to these challenges of India, we are not merely finding a solution for the 1.3 billion people of India, but for the next 4 to 5 billion people of the world who are moving from poverty to middle class in the next 2 to 3 decades. And that is what India will do using the strength of this data.
That's very well said. Before I turn it over to Amit for the next kind of key question, are you seeing backlash against some of the large application providers? Like we're seeing backlash against Facebook and against Google and against some of the big IT firms here? Amitabh, that's you.
No, we are not seeing any backlash against these companies. We may be seeing backlash against some of the larger companies, but here you must understand that what we built up, the ecosystem, has actually enabled a lot of young startups to innovate. So we are seeing a lot of young unicorns coming up. This year, in the first year, we've had about almost 36 new unicorns coming up in the first 10 months of the year. So as I said, what this fintech ecosystem that has been evolved has ended the traditional approach with, customized, this has totally actually disrupted the system. And what it has done is that it has, across lending, across insurance, across a whole range of new tech areas, we've seen young startups growing and blossoming in India. And that has been greatly welcomed by the people of India. But I also want to say that as I said, we've taken leadership role in the open data for finance space. We've already operationalized a concept where exchange of financial information, from fiduciary to the end user takes place through the consent of the customer. And this consent framework has gone live with the account aggregators ecosystem, and the account aggregator ecosystem has been announced by the Reserve Bank of India. And this will actually democratize access to data in the ecosystem through a consent framework. And that will greatly help in the developing of new use cases in both lending and financial management. And this is a unique model of account aggregator system. Many of the developed countries of the world will greatly benefit from learning from the account aggregator system.
This is very fascinating, Amitabh, in terms of like what you're really saying is that how we are really looking at creating inclusive models and how we are really bringing that whole aspect of inclusiveness. But just taking that step forward, Gopal, just very quickly, just wanted to understand, what do you think is the future of mobility and mobile businesses in India? In fact, there are so many technological changes that we are seeing. Like, when you were talking about 3G about a few years back or a decade back, we are at 4G, and suddenly we are saying we are going to be moving towards 5G. Could actually have a huge create a huge disruption or a change that might actually happen. How do you really look at this transformation coming across?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this, that is the nature of the industry we're in. We're constantly investing to stay in the same place. And so, yes, 3G was one of the fastest demises of any technology. 4G has been a massive adoption that we've seen in India, and 5G is around the corner. I would say that, there are a couple of things that, firstly, I think that 5G can truly change the world because the amount of innovation that can be done on 5G networks, I think we haven't yet understood what can happen. Just as happened in 4G, I mean, many of these companies that were born, whether it is companies like Uber or many of the Indian companies that were born on through this innovation were actually created on 4G networks. In much the same way, you're going to see a lot more innovation on 5G. But from our perspective, I think there are a couple of things that I do believe we should also get right. Number one is that, and this is where I think the US can also play a role. Today, if you look at the radio manufacturers of equipment, it's only the Europeans, which is the two Scandinavian companies, and the Chinese. And the Chinese, as you know, have been excluded in several markets around the world. I come back to the cost of doing business. The cost of doing business has to come down. And to reduce the cost, ultimately, what is now commonly referred to as open radio access networks, which is where you disaggregate the software and the hardware, commoditize the hardware, get the software on the cloud, and run a whole mobile network on the cloud through the software, is really where 5G is going. We have actually taken, I would say, perhaps the lead globally on supporting this open radio access networks in India. We're trying to create an ecosystem in India. We're working with some of the US companies. We're also working with Tatas to create an Indian ecosystem of open radio access networks. And I think this is going to be very important because this will be one of the ways by which the US can also get in and actually enter an area that otherwise, the US has been excluded from because it's really been built by the Scandinavians and the Chinese. The second part on the cost of doing business is really, we are a regulated industry in mobile. And I think the cost of business must come down. Indian spectrum costs are still amongst the highest in the world. Laying out fiber, which is the heart and backbone of mobile connectivity, is still amongst the highest in the world because of exorbitant costs. And I know that Mr. Kant has been fully supportive in actually trying to help the industry bring that down. The government has done a bunch of seminal reforms in the recent weeks and months to change the economics of the industry, but a lot more needs to be done. The third part is the ease of doing business. We've been subjected in the past to a mindless array of complexities. And again, I would say some seminal reforms have been done in the recent past to simplify the way we do business. In a digital world, you don't need to store paper anymore. I mean, everything needs to be on the cloud. And all of that has been enabled now through the reforms that have been put in place. But again, I would say a lot more needs to be done. So I come back to what is required. I think what is required is, given the economics of mobility and given the economics of what our citizens can afford, the cost of business has to come down. Taxes are still amongst the highest in the world as far as mobility is concerned. Spectrum costs, open radio access networks, but fundamentally, there also has to be an ecosystem approach, which is really where private players, application providers, software players, hardware providers, and of course, the government creating the enabling policy framework is really how this industry can flourish. And I think that is really the need of that. We've got to set our differences aside and come together as a community to say, how do we actually make this infrastructure a world-class infrastructure that can then deliver innovation? Amit was mentioning separately ahead of this call that 6.5% of GDP is contributed by mobility. And that can actually grow with all the innovation that can be created in the future on 5G networks.
Thanks very much, Gopal. I'd like to ask Amitabh to kind of comment on the more or less the same topic. What do you see as the most important factors moving forward in making sure that it's a positive direction for this kind of continuing transformation?
So, let me touch on another aspect. Firstly, I entirely agree with what Gopal has said. But what has happened as a consequence of this is that vast amounts of data are being generated through various platforms in India now. We are already data rich, and now we need to use this data and become more and more data intelligent. We must leverage disruptive technologies for furthering financial inclusion in India in a very big way. We have a robust regulatory system, and I think we should leveraging the data and innovating further and further through sandboxes and account aggregator ecosystem, which has been developed, will enable us to push the limits on, push more and more for greater innovation, and will allow many young entrepreneurs of India to emerge through this in a whole range of new areas of growth.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone in the audience, just a second, Amit, remind everyone in the audience that if you have questions, please put them in the chat window, and Amit and I will make sure that we get them to our panelists at kind of smooth points in the conversation. Go ahead, Amit.
So Amitabh, like this has been something very interesting as to what you're saying, like the data and things. But what I do see is something very positive, and that is that it has created inclusion in many ways, and you have alluded to that fact. But you've been running a very strong program on aspirational districts. You've been instrumental in really formulating it and implementing it. How do you think this mobile stack or mobility has enabled some of the things on the aspirational district program? Because that was all about social inclusion, movement of what I call the trajectory up in terms of performance and things.
Yeah. So, Amit, this program is on the 115 of our most backward districts. They're very difficult, far-flung districts. We don't call them backward, we call them the aspirational districts of India. Here we are transforming the districts because we strongly believe that data is the key to good governance. If you are able to get real-time data, minute to minute, month to month, you are able to put out data in front of the people who are managing these districts and tell them that your district is either going up or coming down in these different aspects of education, health, nutrition. And, so what we did was to create a dashboard where we were able to get real-time data through the mobile ecosystem, real-time data from 115 districts, put this on a champion of change dashboard and tell the districts that actually here it is, that your performance in these indicators, in these outcomes, you are going up or coming down. And they were competing amongst themselves. So we said that you are here, this is your baseline, you must go up, constantly keep going up. And the districts competed with each other in a very big way. And we've seen these aspirational districts transform themselves in a very short period and move beyond the better performing non-aspirational districts simply because the power of the data could be leveraged through the mobile ecosystem of India. And it was possible when I was a young officer, this was not possible. Data used to be available 6 years later, 7 years later. What the new India ecosystem has done is to make data available on a real-time basis. The second thing that has happened, just look at it. I was a young officer, I was working in Kerala. My job was to transform the lives of fishermen. We gave them new outboard motors, we gave them new crafts, we gave them new fishing nets. But opening their bank account, they were prone to drinking in the night, and therefore opening their bank account was a month. I used to chase bank managers. It used to take me 8 to 9 months to open a bank account for a traditional fisherman. Today, you can open a bank account in less than a minute using the mobile and the biometric. So the transformation has been from 9 months to less than a minute for opening a bank account. And therefore, what we are doing is using the power of data to transform the lives of the common citizens of India through the aspirational district program.
Thanks very much. Let me turn to Gopal for a minute. One of the questions that's come to me by direct message from the audience is about the security aspects of this kind of very widespread accessibility by wireless networks. How are the networks handling this? The scale of people doing good things on the network must also mean that there are people trying to hack in and also people doing not such good things.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think this is a global problem. You do have, especially on the network at the far edge, there are constant attacks. This runs into several thousands of attacks that we see on our networks. And we have, we've had to make substantial investments in beefing up the security infrastructure within the company. We also work with the national security agencies, share information, and talk about what we need to do to get better. We're partnering with some of the best companies in the world. We also have, made substantial investments in actually creating our own security operations center, which is a real-time outfit that monitors all kinds of attacks on every part of our network. And in fact, some of these capabilities we're also taking in terms of a practice out into the market to our enterprise customers who also faced similar challenges, because we are, I would say, the spine around which a lot of things happen. So yes, this is a problem, and the thing is that you have to constantly stay ahead of what is happening, and it's a constant battle. It's like a treadmill that you're on, because it's getting more and more sophisticated every day, and technology that we've got to work with, the monitoring systems that we work with, and how we minimize some of these eventualities is also something that we need to get better every day.
Okay. Amit, do you have a question from your side? I've got a couple backed up from direct messages to me.
Yeah, please, why don't you just go ahead and then I'll come back.
Okay. So this question is for Amitabh. Talk a little bit about how digital transformation during the response to COVID-19, how did that proceed in India?
The mobile ecosystem in India was extremely robust. We could all grow and survive and flourish during the COVID period only because of a really top-class mobile ecosystem, which has been built up by Indian companies like the Airtel and Jio. It never faltered. Anything could have faltered, but the digital ecosystem and the mobile ecosystem was just flawless. It was top class, it was brilliant, it was better than any country in the world. And therefore, what has happened in India is that government has created the platforms on which a number of young companies have grown and flourished, and they have done really outstanding work. And that is really the key to the success of India. This would not have been possible without the private sector. This would not have been possible without the great innovative spirit of the Indian private sector. This would not have been possible without the enterprising spirit of the Indian private sector. All the examples that I've given you, starting from mobile telephony to insurance tech, to payments, to flow-based lending, to trading, all this is flourishing and growing in India because of the really outstanding entrepreneurship of young Indians. And they are the ones who will grow and flourish in India. Just yesterday, we've had one of the wealthiest, one young women entrepreneur has become the wealthiest female entrepreneur in India, simply because during the COVID period, she's used digital means to sell beauty products all over into the rural areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities. Nayika's Falguni Nair is a great example of this fact. Or look at Zomato, which during the COVID period grew and flourished, and its IPO was oversubscribed 34 times simply because it used the power of digital technology and the mobile telephony during the COVID period. And so you've seen an emergence of a vast number of the companies which have grown and flourished and which will continue to grow and flourish in India will be the digital companies which are growing on the back of mobile telephony, and companies which will increasingly go green, which will be going green in the coming years.
Gopal, just a quick question here, from what Mr. Kant was saying, there have been some transformational models that have actually got created. What we have also seen is that there are certain industries which have really truly got transformed. They're seeing a lot of disruption. Say, for an example, it would be education or healthcare. How do you really look at this aspect? Because you might not want to accept, but it has actually all happened because of the ecosystem that was created by enterprises like you, because you've enabled such level of change. And how do you really look at this?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I just want to pick up on the point that Mr. Kant was saying, and if you don't mind, Amit, just come back to the period of the pandemic. There was at that time we have a network operating center, which is really the heartbeat of the center that monitors the entire network around the country. We had over 600 engineers stationed at the center, and they're sort of monitoring screens real time to really look at the quality of the networks. Now, with the pandemic, all of them had to operate from home. Overnight, the entire network monitoring actually moved into remote locations across different people's homes. At the same time, we had our own people who had to go out at the industry to actually install connections in people's homes, repair networks. And, I salute some of our frontline, the way that they were able to hold up the networks and do whatever it is that customers required. All the things that you talk about, Amit, whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, whether it is working, whether it is ride delivery. I mean, Mr. Kant talked about NICA. All of it actually has been enabled on the mobile infrastructure. So to that extent, I think it is an ecosystem which is truly all-encompassing, and that is the basis on which any innovation using, whether it is payments, whether it is connectivity, all of that is really being enabled only through this digital infrastructure that's been created.
Mm-hmm. And so, just following up on Gopal's point, that's an important thing in terms of how it has got created on top of this. Amitabh ji, there are two aspects which have really run during this time of the pandemic, and we have not really talked about it, and just wanted your views on it. But I see that Aarogya Setu and CoWIN were two such important factors which were riding on top of the mobile network, which helped us really tackle the pandemic in a very, very effective way. Of course, every country has had its skirmishes or whatever, but what India was able to do on, say, contact tracing through Aarogya Setu, CoWIN through vaccinations and everything. So that's something very, very powerful. How do you really look at that?
So Amit, actually, let me first say that during the COVID period, we've seen actually 4 to 5 startups becoming unicorn every month. 50% of our unicorns today have come up during the COVID period. 50% of the unicorns have come up during the COVID period. Thirdly, the question that you asked, Aayog Setu was developed and evolved from within NITI Aayog, and then it was finally handed over. And let me tell you, which is not commonly known, is that Aayog Setu model was developed in partnership with the private sector. And it was later, for security purposes, it was handed over to the Ministry of Information Technology, which ran it and which enabled us to do this entire vaccination, this entire process of RT-PCRs, etc., online in a very transparent manner. And then the development of this CoWIN app. And CoWIN app, again, has been totally verifiable. It's seamless, it's digital, and India is the only country in the world where your entire vaccination process, you get a digital certificate, and which is totally seamless and verifiable. And this has again been possible. It's linked to your biometric, it's linked to your passport. It's again been possible because of this very powerful biometric system that India has built up, and also because all this is possible from your mobile. So from your smartphone, enables you to do this. And that is phenomenal, just phenomenal, that I can download my certificate, I can take my biometric, I can link it to the passport, all through my mobile. So actually the entire process of COVID vaccination process, and India has done over a billion plus vaccinations. Billion plus vaccinations. As I keep saying, India's size and scale is so enormous. So what we are doing today, we are really the lab of the world. What we do here today then becomes the model for the rest of the countries to replicate.
Very interesting.
Thanks,
Richard.
Amitabh. I actually have a very important question, and this is an important question because it reflects the views of Stanford students. And it's really a twin question, one for you and one for Gopal. So the student writes, how can someone studying at Stanford help contribute to the technology sector in India? For Amitabh, we have so many interesting ideas, but it's easy to get stuck in the bureaucracy. How do you reach the right people in government in order to move forward? And there's also a question for Gopal in this, and that is, what about the telecom sector for a startup? Do would you suggest that young entrepreneurs jump into telecom related, or can it only be sustained by groups that have deep pockets? So Amitabh, why don't you take care of the access question first?
So let me just say that don't waste your time in Stanford University. Take the next flight, come to India. We have the Atal Innovation Mission. We will give you several projects, move you into the field. We have tinkering labs, 9,000 tinkering labs from class 6, where we provide robots, 3D printers, and Internet of Things and drones, all from class 6 onwards. Come down to India, become a part of this completely revolutionary movement that is taking place in India. You will go back, full of vibrancy and dynamism. You will be transforming the rest of the world with what you've learned, and greatly help us to transform more and more in India. Become a part of this transformation in India. Just send me a mail. And I'll be delighted to handhold you and take this forward.
So for the person who asked the question, send me the mail and I'll forward it. We'll take care of it that way. We don't usually give out emails directly in the program, but I'll be happy to forward that mail. Gopal, what about telecom for startup ideas?
I think that's a great question, and it's not necessary that you really need to have deep pockets to do innovation within the telecom sector. And the way I look at the telecom sector, it's really a sector that in a way enriches people's lives. So if you look at, and let me give you a couple of examples, and I'll give you two examples. One is an example of a young kid who was about 28, and he had a team of about 7 people, and he was into developing using, there are 20 odd vernacular languages in India, leading languages, and he was trying to develop a solution of actually looking at speech analytics using voice recognition technology, and that was the technology that he was trying to build. So he got funded. The first round was funded, and then after that he ran into trouble, and he wanted to shut the company down, and that's where we came in touch with him. So we just brought him inside the company. We hired that team, and we told him that, look, you be here for 3 years. You take our call centers receive millions of calls in all kinds of languages. Do whatever it is that you want to do here, build your technology, and then we can fund you, or you can go out and actually do something on your own. By the way, the tech that he's developed is now used across the company. And like the example that I mentioned, which is that we have removed all the people who was physically monitoring calls through the speech analytics and technology that this kid and his young team developed. And today, just last week, he spoke to me saying, I have a new idea. I want to go out and I really want to look at how telcos can maximize spectrum usage. And I have something that is really interesting. So I said, please do it. If you need to be funded for it, let us know. But if you don't want funding and you just want office space, that's also fine. A second example is the Accelerator Program. We have an Accelerator Program within the company. And what we do here is companies, startups, really tiny startups that want to leverage our infrastructure, want to leverage our customer base, want to leverage our distribution, our payments capabilities. We enable them to do that. We take a small stake in them. We leave them completely independent. And at the same time, they're free to go and raise money and actually create value. So one of the companies that I do want to talk about is a very young company, which is trying to solve the problem of identifying who's a migrant labor so that that person can be employed by the Zomatos of the world or the Ubers of the world or the Olas of the world. We know who a migrant is on our mobile data because we know the calling patterns that go across different parts of the country. We know their usage patterns. And so this company is actually using some of the data that we have to identify migrants and give them employment. That's the second example of how you can actually develop innovation riding on the existing infrastructure that we've created. And one of the things that I think that companies like us really believe in is that we are not here to do all the innovation ourselves. We want to enable an ecosystem. We want to make it very easy to partner with us, whether it's a small company or a large company. So that is really the heart of. A simple answer to your question is that yes, if you have an idea, again, I would love to receive an email, put you in touch with the right people, and help in enabling that aspiration of yours.
I also want to change a little bit from the usual format we've been following and ask Amit Kapoor to speak about startups getting started in India, because you're CEO of the India Council on Competitiveness. What kind of advice would you give to a startup?
Oh, so Richard,
with an idea, I mean, maybe not even a company yet.
So Richard, in fact, as a startup, I would rather say there are two parts to the story here. In fact, one is, and I'm talking from a fairly broad perspective, when you talk about India, India is very clearly a destination which is seeing tremendous amount of economic progress. And it is at a cusp of change, which is enabling social development and social progress. So if you really want to look at startups, I think if you're able to create solutions which are able to bring in this aspect of economic progress and social progress together, that would be something very, very powerful. In fact, the new age models, which have been transformative, they are the models which have actually created economic aspect or economic gains plus the social gains that you're really talking about. And that's also something that we have been talking about in the past, is in terms of saying that how do we really create a new age capitalistic model which can actually be something very, very powerful, and how do you really do it? So if somebody asks me what are those 2 or 3 things you have to do, one is that how do you redefine value for your consumers? Because today is the idea in terms of redefining that value, and there are enterprises after enterprises which have really redefined value. The second is in terms of how do you really make your value chains more effective, and that is getting reflected in the challenges in the pandemic times. And the third would be that how do you work with your communities? Today is the time when it has become more important than ever in the past, that how do you work with communities and people at large? It is not just about wealth accumulation, it is about wealth generation for people across the board. And that is what you need to really look at. And if you're able to get this right, I think we can see a huge level of transformation, and all the debates that happen around capitalism being bad or whatever across the world will actually get significantly reduced. And I think it is not the old companies which will do that. It is the new age companies which will actually redefine that whole value per se. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Those are great perspectives. I'm sorry to be asking all the questions, but I'm getting a lot of people asking me questions in direct message, so I'm the only one that knows the questions. Amitabh, how do you see the future of cash? The person who asked the question noted that the Reserve Bank of India has imposed harsh penalties for ATMs that run out of money. So do you think that ATMs are going to be relevant in the future, or will the UPI payments just completely take over everything?
I give the ATM model another 3 to 4 years. ATMs will die out. The power of the mobile is so unique, and the ability to do transactions through mobile is so easy and so simple that why should anyone go to an ATM and withdraw money? It doesn't make sense. If you can do it on the click of your mobile, nobody will ever go to ATM. So ATMs for me are dead for the future.
Okay, thank you.
I do. If I could just add a different perspective on this. UPI is doing about 1 billion transactions a month, and if you look at UPI, the tools that it has displaced are things like credit cards, debit cards, ATMs. That's really what it has displaced. Now, the question to whether cash will die out in India. Let me just give you a couple of stats just to sort of bring it alive. If you go back and look at pre-demonetization in India, which is what happened in 2016, about 12% of cash in circulation of the GDP was really what India had. 12% of GDP was cash in circulation. After the demonetization, that fell to 8%. But today it's back to 14.5%. So the cash is not completely gone. But what's happened is that UPI has displaced traditional methods of digital payments. And I think the next wave of UPI growth has to be to actually take this deeper down the income strata, because today there are still 400 million users in India that have a feature phone that don't have data connectivity. And all of that upgradation needs to happen over a period of time as people get more and more digitally enabled.
Thank you. One more question really for both of you. Go ahead.
So just two things that are going to happen, and which is very critical. In the next couple of years, as cheaper smartphones keep coming in, you will see this movement away from features phone towards smartphones, which will enable these transactions to happen. And the second will be the spread of regional languages, which will enable a vast segment of people in rural areas to do transactions through regional languages. And that'll make things far more easier. And natural language processing will enable that to happen. And that will bring in a huge amount of easiness in the system. But the cost of smartphones, you will see a huge fall in them. That is the next big disruption that will happen in India.
Thank you. Another question really for both of you, and this has to do with data protection laws. Amitabh, do you see India coming up with a major data protection law like GDPR or the one that was just passed in China, PIPL? And Gopal, how do you see the kind of data governance moving forward from the private sector perspective? So Amitabh, if you'd take that first, that would be great.
We had a committee headed by a very distinguished judge of the Supreme Court who had given in his report. That is, we are great believers in data privacy. That is under parliamentary discussion. The committee is at a very, very advanced stage of submitting its final report to the government. And we'll definitely have a data privacy law based on the recommendations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee. That is critical for India. And we need a very progressive data privacy law, which we are waiting for the final report from the Parliamentary Standing Committee. So I don't want to comment much on it at this stage.
Okay, but something is in progress.
Yes,
I would also actually on behalf of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gopal.
I think Mr. Kant was trying to say something.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's at a fairly advanced stage, and I think we should have the final report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee very shortly. After receiving it, the government will examine it and take it to the Parliament for making a law.
Okay, thank you. Gopal, from the private sector point of view, how do you see data governance proceeding?
Yeah, I think that, I don't have anything much to add beyond what Mr. Kant has said. I think we do need a strong data privacy and a framework. As telcos, I think our business model is very clear. So the telco industry actually is at the forefront of data privacy. If you look at most customers, they will trust everything about their data with the telcos, but perhaps it's not the same when it comes to other companies that have a business model that is based on advertising and monetizing some of the data that they have. So I think, yes, you do need a governance framework which is balanced, which protects privacy, which enables consent, which is what Mr. Kant talked about, but at the same time, one that enables innovation. And you have to strike that right balance. And I think that is something that is required.
Thank you. Also, I had a question come in about the digital divide, especially between older people who are not comfortable with information technologies or smartphones and younger people. What can you do about that? Because older people are subject to being tricked. They're maybe less willing to use these new devices because they move quickly and maybe they can't see so well. That's a real social inclusiveness problem.
Yeah, I think that is true. That is true for not just older people, but also within India, you see some of the our women penetration of mobile device and smartphone is slightly lower than male. The third part is that lower income consumers again have much lower penetration, and part of it is also challenges on the way to use it. Like a feature phone is actually just easier, and they're more habituated to actually find their whatever they want to do on the keypad. The second issue is that feature phones tend to have longer lasting batteries, and that makes a big difference, particularly in deep interior parts of India where you don't have as much easy access to charging stations and so on and so forth. So some of those challenges are certainly there. I think smartphone technologies are getting are improving by the month in terms of battery life and so on. There's also a bunch of experiments that we've run, and I know Google had run it, Facebook had run it, to actually educate people to come online. The challenge in this is that digital education is a little tougher here, because you have to go in and actually explain, sitting in front of somebody how this thing gets used. And once that is enabled, then suddenly the world opens up, and we've seen that happen through some of the investments that we've made. But it's an arduous process. That said, the other challenge is also the price of the smartphone, and Mr. Kant alluded to that. As that's coming down every quarter, every month, again, you see a greater penetration. So we do see a secular growth in smartphone penetration. There's still about maybe 25% of industry revenues that come out of feature phones, but perhaps a lot more customers, about 450 million. We're getting about 45 to 50 million users upgrading to 4G and smartphones every year. If we can accelerate that and finish that within 5 years, which means double the pace of adoption, then I think we are done. It's always the S curve sort of kicks in. At some point, it starts petering off in terms of adoption. But this is really one of the challenges that the industry, manufacturers of phones, us, people like us, the application providers, all of us are working on.
Thank you. Amitabh, we have a question coming in about the whole pressure on companies for ESG reporting, and also factoring in more consideration of society and sustainability into business plans for the companies. Do you see what's happening in India in that regard? Is ESG, the ESG movement, hitting among investors? Is it starting to be seen among companies?
So India has just made massive commitments at the COP26 in Glasgow. It's not just about ESG, but I think India will actively be a very major disruptor in going green. And companies which go green will be adding value and attracting capital. Companies which do not go digital and which do not go green will not grow and flourish. And therefore, it's not about ESG. It's about actively pursuing new green technologies of tomorrow. My belief is that the world will move towards non-fossil fuels. And there's a massive opportunity in terms of a whole range of new areas of growth, whether it's mobility, whether it's battery storage, whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's a whole range of new areas of growth. And I think companies which increasingly adopt being consciously going green and aggressively going green will be the ones which will be attracting both value and capital. And the next round of disruption, the first round of disruption has been because of digitization. The next round of disruption will happen because of India's commitment towards going green. And that would mean that India will have to move away from fossil fuel. The renewable companies the Indian renewable companies have demonstrated their great ability to aggressively lead in this regard. And you will see the next round of companies doing this, driving electric mobility in India or battery storage in India. But electricity is only 20% of the total energy. So India will have to go in for green hydrogen in a very big way. We are a major importer of fossil fuel, and the Prime Minister has committed that by 2047, when India becomes 100 years, it'll be actually exporting energy, not importing energy, and therefore we'll have to switch over in refineries and steel manufacturing, in fertilizer to green fuels, which would really mean that using renewable to crack water and create green hydrogen for all these areas, new areas of growth. And India has a massive potential. It is blessed with fascinating climatic conditions. It can be an exporter of green hydrogen and green ammonia for the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you. I think that the best thing for us to do is to kind of move toward a last question for the formal part of the program. And then for those of you who can stay for a more informal, off-the-record discussion, we'll turn the recording off after this next question and have just a little bit more open discussion for a few minutes. Amit, let me ask you to take the last question.
So, like we've had a very interesting discussion here, but I would like to ask one last question. Gopal, if you could just go first, and then we'll go to Amitabh-ji. What do you see, or how do you see India of the future, maybe 5 to 10 years, especially in the era of mobile technologies and things like, what is it that you see, or crystal ball gaze into it?
I think, my dream would be every single, citizen of India has a smartphone. 5G networks over the next 5 years are ubiquitous. We have, while we've invested and have some of the best digital infrastructure, the pattern of consumption in India, the density of population in India is such that the experience that we have is good, but is not world-class. And I hope that we are able to give our customers a world-class experience. And that will come down to the ingenuity and the investment that the industry has to make, which I think it will step up to, but equally a enabling framework which lowers the cost of doing business so that you're able to actually give customers what they're looking for and impact the GDP of the country. At the same time, the innovation that can happen on this through the ecosystem that we are a part of, I think can in many ways drive greater financial inclusion, drive greater value for people all over the country, and create new businesses and drive economic growth. So I would say that that is really what this dream is about.
So Amitabh-ji, the final word from you on this, like, what do you see as the India of the future? Maybe 5 to 10 years, or even 2047, as you would say, India at 100.
No, these are very transformative moments for India. As I've been saying, this is a massive opportunity to disrupt traditional business models and do path-breaking work for young entrepreneurs in a range of areas. We're seeing this happening in areas of flow-based lending. So all lending, the traditional form of banking will, to my mind, not survive unless you are totally digital. New banks will come in. You will see a huge amount of innovation around trading. You'll see a huge amount of innovation around insurance. All this will be digital, mobile-based. Nobody will, both the government and private sector will move away from paperwork to mobile-based functioning totally, entirely. And that is what will happen, that this will make things easier, simple for the end consumer. So what you are impacting is the ease of doing business. Things will become easier and simpler. You'll make ease of living for the citizens of India. That will make things, provide a huge amount. Citizens will not have to run around for paperwork. Everything will be online and it'll all be digital on the click of the mobile.
Thank you. With those, I think, Richard, I'll leave the final word to you, but I must thank Gopal and Amitabh-ji for really joining this very interesting discussion. But Richard, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And on the click of a mobile, I have to say that we're about to come to the end of our formal program. I'd like to express my thanks to Gopal Vittal and to Amitabh Kant, and also to my colleague Amit Kapoor for participating in this really exciting discussion. Next week, we're going to have Mr. Hiroshi Saijo, who is the head of business development and strategy for a major Toyota Motors spinoff initiative called Woven Planet Holdings. He's going to talk about smart city infrastructure for mobility. So we'll call an end to the formal session, but stay around for a few more minutes for a few more off the record remarks.